All right, Ben. So thanks for coming on the podcast. It was nice of Dan to connect us. He told me about your company and Gesture. It's kind of a unique thing, but maybe we can go back a little bit because I know you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur. You've had other ventures and things. So maybe we go back, like, kind of where you're from, where you grew up, and we could talk about, different things you've done and leading up to Gesture, and then we'll get into that too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me. Also, I
Great,
appreciate that.
great, great, great. So
Definitely.
where you from originally? Yeah.
Originally from Denver, Colorado. Grew up there my whole life.
Okay.
Moved to New York about 10 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of had my hands in just about every sort of different kind of venture you can imagine, or I say industry that you can imagine. So it's actually been pretty cool.
Yeah. So what industry? Like, do you remember your first business? What you
Yeah.
started?
So first business, I was about 15 years old, and again grew up in a very kind of rough part of Denver. And so with that said, I came across a computer that my uncle had given me, and it was kind of an old computer. He worked for Exxon
Okay.
and Exxon Mobil, and so he was kind of a computer guy there, and he always had his old computers kind of lying around. And
Do you
so,
remember what it was? Was it like an old PC or something like that?
yeah, I think it was like a. Don't quote me on this. You don't quote me on this, but it was like a three. I think the processor was like a 286.
Right.
So
Yeah. Five and a quarter
there
inch
was no
floppy,
gig. There
right?
was no gig. Yeah, there was
Yeah. Yeah.
the floppy. It was really, really, really cool.
It's
So
funny.
with that, took that computer, fixed it up, and then basically uh, found a monitor to kind of match up with it, and then ended up turning it over for a small profit. And so from there, we basically I ended up just finding more computers that were either thrown out in the garbage. I put an ad out, and I really started finding people started kind of donating their computers, and so I basically started
Like a
learning operating systems,
refurbished.
and
Yeah.
that was it. I was 15 years old, and I was
Right.
selling computers that I was finding, fixing them up, reformatting drives and so on and so forth. And then from there, I kind of made a small business out of it. So by the time I was 15, 16, I was kind of known as the computer guy. If you need a computer,
Yeah. And it wasn't as
call
easy
Ben.
as
And
today. I mean, you could crack the box open, but it wasn't like you slide things in and snap them in. You had to know what you're doing. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. I didn't have an A+ certification or anything like that at the
Right.
time, and all I knew is just what I kind of taught myself. And so,
Figured it out.
yeah, one thing led to another, and there we are. So,
Right. The funny thing is those machines, they couldn't do anything. We thought they
right,
could do a lot,
nothing,
but they could do nothing.
right, nothing. And so that was the cool thing, is I actually took a lot of the stuff that was coming out at the time. This was probably late 90s, 98, 99.
Okay.
Started upgrading the RAM. I started, changing out the motherboards a little bit. I was putting in, I don't know if you remember, 4-speed CD burners,
Yeah.
6-speed CD burner.
Yeah.
I,
Right.
I had an 8-speed CD burner, and that
Yeah.
thing
There
was
you go.
like the fastest thing on the block. I was burning
Right.
CDs, and I actually turned that into a business as well. I would take people's playlists, give
Oh,
them to
that's
me, and then
funny.
I'd go to a Napster, download music,
Yeah, I
and make
remember
CDs.
Napster. They
Yep.
got shut down too. I mean, my kids don't even know what CDs are. It's all streaming now, and
Exactly. My daughter couldn't download a song a year ago. It was taking longer than about 10 seconds. And I said, "What's your problem?" And she said, "The song's taking forever to download. It won't download." And I was like, "Well, let me explain to you something real quick." I said, "Let's see how you feel about setting about 5 songs before you go to bed to download,
right, the whole
and
night.
then the whole night. Your grandma comes
Yeah,
along at about 11:30 at night, picks up the phone to call your aunt, knocks off all my music, and in the morning I have
right.
nothing."
Yeah, because all dial up, right?
It was all dial up. That was it.
Oh man,
56K. If
that's
you were
so funny.
lucky.
If you're lucky,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
56K
Yep.
modem. Do they even know what the word modem is? Well, they know
That,
like cable modem. They know internet
yeah,
modems,
that's
but
about
not.
it. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. There's people in the Midwest that still have dial-up service.
What's that?
There's people in the Midwest that still have like dial-up service because they don't have high-speed internet available. I don't know where they get these modems from.
I don't know. It's
Could you imagine
crazy. You would think that they would
loading
still.
yeah,
I
like a
remember at
website
the
you have now?
grocery,
Could you imagine that loading now on a
right?
dial-up modem? Take you all day.
Right. You would go to the grocery store and pick up a free CD to Net Zero, and download 56K, and it was crazy.
That was so funny in
But
AOL
yeah,
days.
so
Anyway,
that was kind of my first business. Yeah, it was.
yeah. So it was
That
always
was
in your
it.
blood, like entrepreneurship, and you saw things and you're like, I make a business out of this.
Yeah,
I was
pretty
kind of
much.
the
I mean,
same
I
way.
didn't
Yeah.
really have a choice, kind of growing up in the area that I grew up in. I didn't really have any other choice. It was either that or kind of jump on the not so good street pharmaceutical wagon. I wasn't
Yeah,
about to do
right.
that.
Yeah,
So,
no, not
yep,
good.
yep.
I was kind of the same way. I ended up detailing cars in the summertime because my uncle asked me to clean his car and he was never available because he was a lawyer. So I went to his office building. Next thing you know, people wanted me to detail their cars. I'm like, oh, I can make money doing this. So I did that. I never really
Right,
had like a job. I was always on
right,
a hustle, I guess is the word,
right.
right?
That's exactly it. It was a
Yeah,
hustle. Yep,
exactly. Okay, so that's a
yep.
teenager. So that brought you through high school. So then what did you, I don't know if we really had our real business when we were in high school because we were so young, we couldn't even own it technically. What was your first like real venture,
Yeah. So that was simultaneously while I was doing that. It was bringing in cash, but I went and got a job at a local KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, in my neighborhood, and then ended up the manager I worked for. I was really inspired by him. He was just kind of I didn't grow up with a father, and so at that point he was kind of like that guy.
like your
And
mentor?
so yeah, he was. And so he moved to another KFC that was about 20 minutes away, and I went with him, and it was a little bit of a treacherous kind of commute there, and so I didn't drive at the time. I was 15, 16, and so I remember I had worked for him for about a year and a half, and right at the time I was about 17, he kept telling me, he said, you have a knack for leadership and for management. Have you ever thought, and you really catch on very quickly, have you ever thought about owning, maybe your own restaurant when you turn 18? And at that time,
You're like, right. What are you
I
kidding?
just was kind of like, okay, yeah. So the other sort of like interesting twist and turn to this is at the time I was 16 and I actually had I had a son at that time.
Wow.
So yeah, I was 16 years old and my son was born. And so that's why one of the reasons why I went to work for KFC. And so he was just kind of like, this could really provide a decent future. And so long story short, fast forward, when I turned 18, he actually believed in me enough and really vouched for me to find another KFC restaurant that was for sale. And he basically helped me kind of raise funding and did do what I needed to do to go out. And I actually ended up buying my first KFC when I was a little past 18.
Wow.
And this KFC was the KFC that nobody wanted. It was in
Right.
it was in one of the worst part of Denver. Bulletproof windows, bulletproof glass, tables and chairs were chained to the ground.
Right.
And yeah, no, they couldn't keep a staff there because it was in Bloods and Crips territory.
Oh, wow.
And so,
But you get a good deal on it, right?
I did get a great deal on it. So I went in there and within about 6 months, I turned a profit. I had the Bloods cooking at in the back, and I had the Crips taking orders, and I got everyone to work together in harmony. And I turned a profit in about 6 months, and then I went out and bought another one in the suburbs,
Right, in a better
was a
location.
complete. It was a much complete different sort of situation, but really fun. So that was typically my 18.
So were you like the
20.
youngest franchisee?
Yeah, I was. I was
Yeah.
18. I was about 20 years old by the time I got out of both of those ventures. Yeah, both of those restaurants.
Okay.
Mhm.
So now you never went to college? You were all self-taught?
Yeah, at that time I didn't go to college. I was thinking sort of like restaurant.
Yeah,
I'm going to
keep
be
growing it, right? Franchise,
yeah,
sell them,
that's
buy
exactly
more,
it.
whatever, right? How many
Yeah,
did
but
you
then
have
it was,
at the peak? How many?
I had two.
The two locations?
Yeah, so they were both on opposite complete sides of town, and basically, it wasn't until about 21-ish where a little bit before I turned 21, I knew that okay, do I really want to work 90 hours a week? This is great, but I want to see what else is out there. My friends
sure.
were the same age as I was, and they were out hanging out, they were out partying, they were out, just being teenagers, and I was. My friends were proud of me. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
it was awesome. But at that point, I knew that okay, let me explore college a little bit. So I sold out of those restaurants and went to school and paid my way through school. No money management. So about the second or third year in school, I found out I didn't have any more money after spending all my money in college. And yeah, that's really where it kind of. Yep, that was it. Yep. So.
Right. I think the restaurant business is hard. People think, oh, I could just buy a franchise, but it's 24 hours a day.
I was just telling someone the other day, we had a combo about that, when all of these restaurants, she asked, well, why do you think these restaurants are closed? And I said, that's because they probably weren't doing, they weren't even doing well before the pandemic.
Yeah, it was a
So during the
lifestyle
pandemic,
business,
it
right?
killed
They're
them.
not
Yeah,
making a
exactly.
fortune.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a
Yep.
big problem.
Yep. It doesn't work that way. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right. All right. So
So
you went through college and you graduated and you
no,
kind of
I
started
didn't.
over,
I
right?
dropped out. I dropped out of college.
Oh, really?
23-ish. Yeah,
Okay.
23-ish. Dropped out. I didn't have any more money, and so I didn't know. I was about 22-ish, and didn't really know what exactly, but I knew I was decent with numbers. And somebody said it was kind of like the pursuit to happiness sort of story. Hey, if you're good with numbers, why don't you apply and try to become a stockbroker or something like that? You don't need a college education for that. And this was
Right.
early 2000s, and so at that point, I went to go work for Quest Communications at the time.
Sure.
It was
I remember Quest.
yeah,
Are they still around?
Quest. Yep. No,
Oh.
he stole everyone's money, and so they went out of business. But basically, went to go work for them in the IT department. Believe it or not, I was offered an opportunity by a friend of mine that worked there. This is cool. This is interesting. He kept telling me this is now again early 2000s, probably 2001.
Kind of before the .com boom, right?
Right before, but this is what's funny is Google was barely coming out. It was still Google beta. And so the funny thing was is I have a buddy, his name is Ted, and he kept telling me, and this is really where startups started to pique my interest. And he said, Ben, I have a couple of friends. I went to the University of Illinois. I have a couple of friends who went to the University of Chicago. And basically they're Booth graduates, blah, blah, blah. And this is in Denver at the time. And he said, I'm moving back to Illinois probably at some point because my friends are coming up with this website where you can actually type in your origin and then you can type in your destination and it's going to give you, it's going to search every airline that's out there. And I said, that's the dumbest thing ever. That'll never work. So at that point, I said, that'll never work. And he was like, no. And I said, how fast is it? He said, as fast as your internet connection. And, DSL's coming out here very soon. So it's going to be super quick. And he said, and they have a vision where they want to do car rentals. They want to do hotels. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing. Why wouldn't I just pick up the phone and call a travel agent or call the airline directly? And he was like, no, I'm telling you, man, those days are over. And so he was like, they need another founder. They need another co-founder. They need someone to come in. And at the time I was in IT and I was learning programming. And he said, you should just really check it out. Come to Chicago. And I was like, that's dumb. That'll never happen. And so about a month later, he comes in and he was like, I just resigned today. He was like, I put in my 2 weeks and leaving. And I was like, you're going to Chicago to pursue that dumb idea? And he was like, yeah, they came up with the company. It's called Orbitz. And I was like, nah.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, we all know the story of Orbitz. They're the Expedia family now. And, but yeah, that was kind of like my first real sort of like understanding of what startups were. And I worked for Quest, fast forwarding journey. I went to go work for Citi as a broker. I worked in risk, did that for a few years, stayed in finance and kind of the whole finance industry until about 2006. And then 2006 is really where my life changed. And so 2006 is I ended up getting into higher education. And then from higher education, I grew my career, and that's really where I learned. I grew up, I guess is the best way to say it is I was about 26 years old in 2006. And I got into higher ed. I always enjoyed helping people. And so I didn't really explore the entrepreneurial piece yet. But I ended up moving up through the rankings in a college system and basically finished my degree. My undergraduate. And then from there, I stayed, this is still in Denver at the time. And then it wasn't until about 2010, where at that point I said, that college was kind of shutting down that industry. And so then I went to New York in pursuit of something else and got to New York. And that's kind of where I was introduced to Ivy Leagues and, the big dogs and big players. And so then at that point I was like, I'm nobody. I really need to kind of figure out. That was it. And so at that point, I was like, I need to jump on this wagon. So that's really where things changed for me.
Wow, I didn't even know the whole story. I figured you'd tell me when we were on, but okay. So now you're in New York. It's 2010. When did Gesture came along later, right? You were involved in some other tech startups before that.
Yeah. So 2010. I was working for. I went to go work for this holding company that oversaw about 30 schools. I came in as like a director of admissions VP, and then kind of moved
So you
my
had
way
been
up.
teaching in Denver? You were or just
No, I was more in the
administration?
admissions, administration side, marketing
Got it.
side in Denver. And then when I got to New York, I had taken what I learned in Denver, moved here, and I was recruited by a holding company out here and in New York. And so I oversaw about 20 something schools out here for multiple companies. Worked my way up to like a chief admissions officer at that time, which is kind of a fancy name for VP of admissions. And so in the higher education world. And so and then it wasn't until about 2013-ish, 2014 is where I got the entrepreneurial itch again. And I started to get into tech, and I knew nothing about tech. I knew zero. Okay. Other than Google and Facebook and those sort of things and what you read, I just, I didn't know much about anything. And so,
what were you doing at Quest? You weren't doing IT. It was all.
Well, I was doing IT. Yeah, I was doing like end user support. But keep in mind that this is when we're still working on something called LANs and WANs.
Yeah, the whole
local area
changed,
networks,
right?
Wide area networks, and you're fast forwarding 20 years, and you're looking at now cloud infrastructure, where there is no such thing as server rooms anymore.
Right,
Everything is
different.
sitting on the cloud. Yeah, so I didn't know much about that, and so. It wasn't until about 2014, 15 is where I said, okay, I know I want to build this. I have this idea. I've always been in higher ed, and there's a LinkedIn for adults, but there is no sort of LinkedIn for high school students. And so that was my first crack at entrepreneurship. I went out and created this like LinkedIn for high school students. And
what was it called?
And it was called Yonster, YONDSTER. Yeah, it's since been acquired and sold, and it's kind of in the process of that right now. But ultimately, I built that, and I actually just went out and started talking to random people, literally random people on the street, random people just in different places. I'd walk into a building and see kind of a guy walking with a laptop, and I'm like, hey, do you know how to program? And he's like, yeah, I do. And I said, hey, I'm starting a startup. This is something you want to do. And he was like, yeah, let's talk more. We have coffee, and then all of a sudden, before we know it, we had like 10, 15 people working on this project. It was pretty cool. I didn't know much about that. Raised a decent amount of funding for it, but ultimately, I just didn't know much about running a startup. I knew how to run, corporations. I could manage large amounts of people, but it's a much different sort of animal when you're dealing with a startup. So
yeah, very much so. It's different.
Oh my
skill
gosh,
set,
yeah.
Right.
Yep. So here's the interesting part. It's really cool. So right around 2015-ish, 16, it was about 15, I think 2015. I knew that I just didn't have a lot of know-how. So what I did is I went and applied at Facebook, and I went and applied at Yelp and Google and a bunch of other places. And I actually got hired at Facebook and Yelp. And so what I did is I took a huge step back, and I went to work. I actually ended up taking the job at Yelp. I really wanted to see what it was like to be inside of a big tech sort of company. And so they weren't as big as Facebook, so the politics weren't probably going to be there. Right. And they weren't they weren't tiny startup. They had just went public a couple of years prior to that. And so I kind of assessed all of that, and then I went to work for Yelp. And I actually learned quite a bit at Yelp. I learned everything from digital marketing to how big tech works. Right. I paid attention. I asked lots of questions. I was interrogated quite often by their executive staff, like, why am I there? Was I there to steal secrets? And no,
they thought maybe you were espionage, like a spy.
Yeah, because during lunch hours at Yelp, I was on this like sort of 8:30 to 5:30 sort of schedule, and during my breaks and lunch hours, I would set aside my laptop, and I would be working by myself in the corner. Right. And everyone else is Yelp has this huge like cafeteria sort of lunchroom where everyone kind of hangs out, and I was just out by myself, doing my thing. And so the cool thing is now, with Gesture, a lot of those Yelp folks that I met sit on my advisory board. so
Nice. So
I've
you really
met
went to
great
Yelp like
people.
with a goal in mind. You were there to
I
learn.
did. I
Learn the
did.
business.
I learned their processes. Yelp has one of the best training programs that's out there. Sales training programs, and they do a lot in terms of training you in digital marketing and those sort of things. And so I learned all of that. And I'll be honest, it's not an easy job. It was one of the most, I would say, difficult jobs that I've ever done. And so got through that, and then it wasn't until about 2017ish, probably summer of 17, is where I said, okay, I think I have enough. Left Yelp, and then decided to pursue Gesture, and that's where Gesture kind of started to come into play. And so at the time, I didn't have any venture capital, didn't have any money. What I had was kind of my intellectual sort of my intellectual brain power. And so what I did is I did something called intellectual bartering. And I invested intellectual capital. And so what I mean by that is there was a school that just had opened up. It was a data science school, kind of a software engineering sort of school that opened up in Soho. And I can't mention the name, but basically what I did is they had access to like all this co-working space there. And so I didn't want to build in a garage, or I didn't want to build in someone's basement. And I didn't, that doesn't really happen in New York. And I didn't want to go rent an apartment or build out my apartment.
Right.
And so what I did is I went to the school and I said, I will build out your curriculum. I'll build out your, I will get people in the chairs, in seats here. I will do all of that if you just give me access to space. I said, all I want is access to some of your space here. I'll even do it after hours, not interfering with, the people that are here during the day. I just want a space for me and the people that I kind of knew that were going to be part of Gesture to build this. And they said, okay. So in exchange,
that's what bootstrapping's all about, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So we kind of, we bartered our intellectual capabilities, and we did that for about probably about a year and a half. And this is basically where and how we got Gesture started.
And
so,
Ben, I think that's a good lesson for people listening, because there's always a way, right? I mean, you don't have money, you can't raise money at the time. You got something to trade, and you knew you had these skills that was valuable to them, and they had something you want, which was the use of the space. And it was probably wasn't full at the time, right? So it wasn't costing them anything. They were getting a benefit from it.
Nothing. Yep. Yeah. We would do it all. I knew that, hey, I kind of made this sweet sort of deal for them. And I said, we'll be out of your way at night after 6. There's nobody really here. Everyone goes home. We just need a conference room from time to time. We'll work in the open space. And I said, in exchange, I'll fill your classrooms. I'll contribute to your curriculum. This is, me using kind of my higher education sort of background to really barter, to trade services.
Yeah. And they had nothing to lose. They had
nothing. Yeah. Nothing at all. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And so then at one point, like I said, we did that, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and so I started taking that very serious. I was like, got to get these students in here, and but the crazy thing about that, the crazy thing about that is this was a data science program that this school was offering, and so that was nothing to nothing to sneeze at. And so at that point, I started meeting really, really intelligent people while I was interviewing these people to bring them in. These are people that.
It was like your way to find people, right?
Exactly. These were people that graduated from Harvard. These are people that graduated from, that worked for some of the big, investment banks out here. And so, they were all interested in either pivoting their career and going into data science. And so a lot of those same exact people they ended up coming to work for Gesture after they graduated data science. And this is just not too long ago, but it was really cool.
Now, Ben, data science, I wonder, my son is at Indiana in Bloomington, and he's studying informatics. Is informatics what data science became? He's studying all the use of big data and AI and all that stuff.
It was almost like the old school mathematician sort of. You won't really hear anyone refer to this guy. Oh, this guy's a mathematician. It was funny you mentioned, because I was actually looking at an old budget for Youngster at one point, and on there we had developer, mathematician. And I was like, that's so funny, because now it's like developer, data scientist.
Yeah, because it's all data, right? That's how you run the whole system.
Yeah,
maybe he can be an intern for you at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
he's studying all big data, all AI, how these decisions are made, how these things are driven by all the big data. That's interesting. But that was kind of like just an offshoot, like an afterthought. You didn't do this and make this deal because you said, wow, I'm going to get access to like the smartest kids around. You did it because you
No.
needed office space.
Yeah, I needed office space. I didn't want to build in a, in someone's apartment. We needed office space. So,
Yeah.
And then it just so happened when I was interviewing these people, to get into the data science, they had to take exams and tests and those sort of things that we essentially created as we kind of launched this school out there in Soho. I'm like, these people are really freaking smart.
I'm sure.
I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And so one of the guys that I had interviewed, he ended up becoming one of our VPs of data science for Gesture, actually. And so it was really cool. And, we a lot of them we hired as interns. They came in, they got their sort of like career started with Gesture, and then they went out and, now a lot of them work for Google and Facebook and stuff like that. But it was really just cool to kind of help them kind of progress through their own career. And in the interim, this was all accidentally done.
Right.
Which was cool.
I
like to always say the accidental entrepreneur, accidental startup. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you're less of a tech guy. You've learned a lot of tech, but you're the guy who's, the big picture guy. Most of these tech guys, they're not entrepreneurs from that standpoint, running a company, building scaling value and things like that. That's right. A skill that you've learned from, curiosity and training and everything like that. So where did the idea for Gesture come from? Seems obvious, but obviously it's,
a combination of things. I like to, this is something that we just kind of discovered over the last few weeks and few months of just conversing with people. There was a multitude of things. It was one is, again, I didn't grow up with much. And so, I always loved what, the outcome of, it's really weird thinking back to just even my mom during Christmas time when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I would ask her for money to go out and buy her own gifts for Christmas, and they were really nothing special. I'd go out and just find something, and at the end, it was kind of just the look and sort of the it was almost just the emotional reaction to what I had bought my mom.
It was the gesture
for her
really. Right?
It was the gesture. It was the fact that I had taken the time to kind of find something, even though it was her money at the time. But it kind of, that sort of thing always resonated to me. And then it was sending flowers, and when I sent flowers, that is where I'm like, this freaking process is broken.
Yeah.
I'm like, I got to get online. I spend 25, 30 minutes looking for the perfect gift, perfect flowers. I go through that. The price starts at, $35, $40. I finish at $65, $70. It's not even a same day gift. It's a 2-day gift, or 2-day delivery time, and then I'm like, when the flowers arrive, it's not even what I ordered, or anything near that. And I'm like, this process is like, this is broken.
Because the guy you're ordering from is sending it to a local guy, and he doesn't have a connection with you. Everything's
a service. It's a service platform. So then I'm like looking at that, and then at that point, I'm just seeing, I'm super upset. The fact that this order was super late, didn't arrive on time, whatever, whatnot. And then I'm going online and I'm seeing all of these sort of reviews that were just negative. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, this process is broken. And so, and then it was just gifting in general, where I at the time was dating someone a while back, and, she was, mentioning that, some stuff about whatnot, some stuff that was happening at her job, and she needed X, Y, Z. And I was like, let me get on. And there was nothing that would deliver instantaneously. And so at that point, I'm like, if it was super expensive. And I was just like, man. Of course. So then at that point, I noticed, okay, well, there's a problem. Let's see how we can solve this. And I said, what if we just combine this sort of industry with everything that we're used to as millennials, Zennials, and Gen X's. We're used to, the on-demand food delivery. We're used to on-demand laundry. We're used to on-demand cable, on-demand movies, on-demand everything can be available, immediately at the tips of your fingers. And it's
the funny thing is, if you go back, everything's perspective, right? So if you go back to when there were 286s and you're working on computers, somebody told you could have something in 2 days, you'd be like, 2 days? That's impossible. I never have anything in 2 days. Now it's like, we want it now.
Now, right. That was it. So that's why I said there's no reason why we can't or why we shouldn't be able to do that. And then, just I didn't really do, one of the things that I was coaching someone the other day, and they were like, oh, I wrote this business plan, and I did all this customer research, and I didn't really do much customer research. I didn't really do much of writing out this like large business plan, despite of what some people tell you, because whatever it is that you go out and research, whatever it is that you go out and write down, will change within
right.
weeks
Well,
and
you
months.
had a business plan, but it wasn't like something out of Harvard. It was a
No,
working.
no.
Probably had parts.
This
You
was
changed it all the time.
that was it,
Yeah.
And so I just basically got a couple of people together, and there's a whole nother narrative, and maybe we can do a part 2 to this, but and this will leave some suspense to some of the listeners. But Gesture actually started with a different name, and they started with different people that are now with the current Gesture. And believe it or not, the original Gesture that I had, not with my current co-founders, but some other guys that I didn't really know. I'll kind of leave it with this. We kind of had built enough of the code to potentially launch a product, and they stole the code and went off and tried to start it themselves and left me kind of abandoned. Yeah. And so at that point I was, this was months and months and months of work put in, and they took the code and went off and tried to build something else. And so at that time, it was me and my co-founder, Daniel, now. We basically, we were kind of just left sitting there. And a lot of the reason why they did what they did, and there's a whole nother story behind that, but they did not want to make Daniel a co-founder of the other Gesture. And so I was adamant about him being a co-founder, and they didn't want to for whatever reason. And so Daniel and I were just kind of sitting there with nothing, and we literally had to start from scratch. And so we scrapped everything, scrapped the old name. It was spelled different. And basically we came up with what we have now, and Gesture, here we are, almost 2 years later,
name.
with 40 markets.
But you learn a lot about protecting your IP and, name.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's hard.
Just getting in business with someone. I mean, I'll be honest, when those guys did what they did to me, it was like a breakup, man. It was worse than a breakup.
Trusted
It was
these
heartache.
guys, right?
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And
feel betrayed.
Yeah, but the one thing that I learned from that I would say that is most important is when I came back to rebuild, I didn't rebuild with a vengeance. I didn't rebuild with revenge in mind. I didn't do any of that. What I did was I set that sort of process, that circumstance, that situation, I set it aside, and we put our heads down for about 8 months. No one heard from me. I didn't talk to anybody. I stayed locked up in this like sort of co-working space that we had access to, and we just built. And I told someone the other day that was kind of, asking me about entrepreneurship, and I said, build quietly and launch very loudly. And I said, with that's basically what we did. And so I remember, somebody had mentioned to me, they said, why don't you put their email addresses in your launch email? And I said, I don't need to, because the best revenge is success, my friend. And,
they'll see you on a
that's exactly
Times Square or whatever.
That's exactly it. It gives me the goosebumps now, and I don't have any bad feelings or ill intentions and anything along those lines. It was all good.
That's not healthy in the end of the day. It just hurts you. You're
It's
better
not.
Focusing on your success, and that's
exactly
enough.
what we did.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about you're in building is coding, building the marketing materials? I mean, the whole thing, is that building the website?
Yeah. So
the app?
this was just the app.
Just the
so
app.
we built 4 apps. So meaning that Google and Android and iOS consumer, and then we built the Google and iOS driver app. Is the best way to put it. So we didn't have any experience. Our guys weren't ex-Googlers or anything like that. We just basically sort of whiteboarded this kind of wire frame, and we built it.
Now you said the driver app. So was Uber around at that point?
Uber was, they were out. They were about 3 years old at the time, about 4 years old at the time. And so they were out, but we didn't, one of the things I was telling someone else the other day is, We never reverse engineered any of the apps out there, Postmates, DoorDash, any of those. What we did is we had an idea of how they worked. And we built this.
But you saw that people were connecting to drivers that way.
Oh, 100%.
And you're like, oh, there's a market out there. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of entrepreneurs think that they need to go in and do all this, competitor research and reverse engineer how something works. You can, but if you build something from scratch, the best way that you know how, I feel like it's going to give you a better understanding of what's necessary for your business, and not trying, because you will overcomplicate that process.
Right, because you're testing and breaking it and fixing it and asking people and trying it out, right?
Exactly. And their apps are years, they're developed years in advance, and they've already have 3-4 years under their belt.
Right.
Where you will just rack your brain trying to create that. So you get the basic concept and build it. So it's actually really cool.
Okay. So this was about what, 18, something like that, 2018?
So we launched October of 18.
And you haven't raised any capital at this point, right? You're totally bootstrapped.
No capital. Bootstrapped. 2018 we launched. I was actually out delivering. I was one of your.
Yeah, you got to do it, right? You're the janitor and the president.
It was me. Yep, that's exactly it. So it was me and a couple of the developers who are the co-founders, Daniel and Christian. These guys are out. We're delivering. Daniel kind of stayed behind the scenes to make sure the tech was up, but me and Christian and a couple of other people were out just doing the deliveries. And that was October. It was funny that the day that we launched and we sent our email, I think we had like 400 or 500 people on our list. We thought that we were going to get like 100 orders. It was really funny. And we got no orders. It was to the point, the first day, somebody called their friend and said, can you just please process an order so we can just go and deliver it, please? Because at this point, we can't call this a loss.
That's so funny.
So they did that, and it made us feel good. But yeah, so we went out and we did that. That was October of 18. And then we kind of tested, fixed. And then January of 19, that's really where I just made the decision. And I said, we're never going to be ready. Just launch to the public. Let's just open this up. And so we basically
because you really made it until that point.
Yeah, so we just made it. It's kind of weird because at some point there is no scientific method to like what's beta, what's alpha, what's when does the word beta come off your app? Does it even go on your app anymore? So at that point we January 19 what I mean launch to the public is became visible to everybody.
Like it went on the app stores and stuff like that.
Yeah, and those sort of things. And then even then, we opened up a bigger area of New York City. So that was the entire sort of like, we had launched from 14th Street to 59th Street. And then when I said open it up, we went all the way to South Ferry, and then we kind of went up to 96th Street. And
so what do you do? How are you promoting the app? If you have no money, right? You're bootstrapping the thing. What do you do? I mean, putting it on the app store doesn't mean I see it, right?
Yeah. So a lot of that was just, sharing online. I mean, we had little bits of capital. We kind of took whatever little money that we had.
Like influencers, bloggers, things like that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We were just trying to get it out. People were talking about it, sharing it, our email list. Email is kind of the cheapest form of advertising to a certain extent. We were just, really kind of sharing it across the board. We were running some small little ads here and there, but for the most part, that was kind of the gist of it. We had our first Valentine's of February of 19. I think we did like 22 orders that day. Right. And that was, there was only 1 or 2 delivery people. That was me. And, I thought we were, to me, that was like the busiest day ever. And so from there, we were still just in New York. We stayed in New York, and then essentially fast forward to July of 19, is really when we took on our first sort of, our first big check. Of capital. So basically,
how many users did you have at that point? You had proven concept.
Oh man, proof of concept was pretty much in there. I can't remember the exact amount of users, but we were pretty much serving all of New York City. We are not in any additional markets. And then July, we kind of took on our first big check. And then,
so had you ever raised capital before for a business?
Just for Youngster.
For Youngster, you had done
capital.
That, okay.
Yep. And then, but this is a different animal. This is a different time. I don't have a logistics background. So that was kind of one of the things.
It's a whole logistics business, really, right?
It is a logistics business.
Yeah.
I always say that, our logistics software that we built is probably, I would say, a lot more valuable than even the gifting application that we built, because we now launched about 4 or 5, or we're launching about 4 or 5 new additional revenue channels just using the logistics software that we have.
There you go. That's your
IP.
So how many investors did you have to talk to before do you remember, before you got somebody to say,
that's
okay,
really interesting. So I was a little gun shy at first, and so we had one guy that was kind of doing some IR for us, and he was doing some investor relations, and he was out, talking to the networks and his network and other networks that he was connected to, and so he had kind of introduced us to some people, and so I don't have the sort of story that Pandora has, where he talked to 301
the guy from
investors.
Peloton, he had to talk to 400 people. Everyone said no.
Exactly. So
right.
now look at them, like, it's just crazy.
But it's a good lesson, though. It shows that not everyone has to ask 400 people.
Well, the thing that's crazy is that, it is a numbers game, but 2, I don't do well with rejection. I don't like rejection. And so I really take it hard, because there was something that I missed, and this is being very vulnerable.
Why would this guy not invest in me? This is a great
exactly.
Right?
So Yelp is the company that really showed me about rejection, because that selling digital marketing to business owners, or to large companies or small companies, and then they tell you no, you have a contract on the table, and they just don't want to sign it for whatever reason. I learned how to take rejection like a pro.
Lesson in life, right?
Yeah. But I learned that, and even now, even to this point, we talk to a lot of investors and venture capitalists, because we're kind of more in the venture capital sort of side now, and they'll send me an email, and they'll say, hey, thanks, a little too early right now, looking, more for a Series A, or looking to write a bigger check. And I'm like, I don't want a bigger check. I just want a smaller check.
Right. Yeah. We don't need a big check. Right. Yeah. But they want bigger deals. The VC.
Yeah, they do. They want, they want $1 billion deals. And
right.
So it's kind of like, okay.
So you're in the
maybe
angel
not
world.
right
That's
now.
Okay.
So So it's kind of like that weird cross, because we have raised quite a bit of money up to this point, and we're now raising another half to close out our seed round. But I mean, it's an interesting journey, so to say. Yeah.
So how big is Gesture now? How many users do you have on the platform?
So
let's see, what is it? It's October or September of 2020 right now. So
September of 20.
So you haven't been in quite 2 years. Coming up on 2 years.
No. So the 2-year mark is typically what I've understood and read in terms of case studies and those sort of things of some of our not indirect competitors, or I would say not direct competitors, but kind of like those guys that are in the same space: DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats, those guys. I noticed that everyone has something very much in common, which is the 2-year mark. And so we're approaching our 2-year mark. January of this year will be January 2021.
Right, you don't count the first couple of months.
No, that was very
very
when
small.
You went
live.
Yep, it was when we went live. And so we're approaching our 2-year mark. And so I noticed the common theme for all of these companies is that they are right around 24 to about 28 months is really when their so-called kind of hockey stick growth started to happen. And so that's really where the big pivot happened for these companies. And so I noticed that. And we're really looking forward to that. And what I mean by that is basically during the pandemic, I had in March, we sent everyone home from the office. At the time, Gesture was 40. We were about 40 people at the time in March. And the majority of everybody was in New York. We had a couple people in New Jersey, but they used to commute in. And so we had a really fairly large office space. I have another side of what I did in the venture capital world. I used to be part of I formed a venture capital company while doing Gesture, and so we ended up getting this really, really large space down here in Midtown Manhattan, and so Gesture occupied a big portion of that. And so we were all there. March, we sent everyone home, And at that point, everyone was working remotely, and I was faced with two things at this point, two different sort of choices. And one was either, roll the dice and, push forward and, figure out how to keep our head above water and survive in these crazy times. Excuse me, be resourceful, make things happen, or
right.
downsize and, put things on hold and wait out the pandemic and see what happens.
Well,
and
I figure the last thing people are doing is buying gifts for other people. They barely can pay their bills, right? They don't know if they're going to have a job.
That was my thought process. And so at that point, I started to look at the unit economics, and I said, Gesture had started out at $20 free delivery. You can get flowers, you can get a bottle of wine for $20. And so I said to myself, and I told the team, I said, we are really sort of recession friendly right now on what's happening in terms of our price points. And I said, here's what we're going to do. So I kind of like putting it into a 3-point plan. I basically said, okay, so we're going to keep going. Number one. Number two, we're going to hire, because we are now remote and everyone's remote. We are going to put out ads, job requisites all over the country, and we are going to hire amazing talent, whether it's in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or Billings, Montana, or Omaha, Nebraska. We are going to hire amazing people. And we are going to ramp that up, and we are going to create multiple multiple channels of revenue. And I said, and we're going to, triple our headcount, and, we are going to, create, and we are going to make noise, and we are going to be sort of an outlet for people that cannot see other people. They cannot see the people that they are closest to. We are going to connect people in a much different way. And so, we're going to do whatever we can to keep our head above water, rather than closing our doors and saying, hey, this doesn't work. And so at that point, that's what we did. We tripled our headcount. We grew from 40 to about 95 people within about 2 months.
While everybody's furloughing, laying people off, you're growing the company. You got a lot of balls.
Correct. Yeah. So we created a whole sales division.
Yeah.
And we had our salespeople calling our customers saying, hey, this is Mitch from Gesture, and we just wanted to remind you that we're here. You can send birthday packages, right? You can send flowers, and people were like, oh my God, I forgot I had the app on my phone. And, they weren't reading emails. They weren't doing those things. And so we ended up having, that was in March, April-ish. So in April, May, and June, we ended up having the 3 biggest months of Gesture's history.
Nice.
And so we ended up launching in 35 markets by June. We went from 4 markets. We were in 5 markets at the time to about 35 markets within about a month and a half.
Wow.
So we basically, I like to call this sort of the, it took us about 2 to 3 weeks to launch a new market. And I took my team, I have an NME team, which is a new market expansion team. And I said, listen, you guys need to launch new markets within about 2 days. And they said, we can't do that.
How long did it take before that?
It was about 3 weeks. It took about 3 weeks to launch.
Okay.
And yeah.
Great,
so I did the Pearl Harbor thing. I did the Pearl Harbor thing. I said, there were these huge these carriers that basically gave these planes a massive amount of runway to launch. And after Pearl Harbor, it took their runway down to nothing. Yeah. And these planes had to land. I said, that's us right now.
Right.
I said,
we got to get up in the air.
In this, get those markets open. And I said, and we will start blanket marketing the entire country. And so we did that. And the funny thing is there was one point where we had created this technology that opens up multiple markets at literally the press of one button.
Right.
And
it has a lot to do with your technology, right? Your logistics technology.
One night somebody left that on, and it opened up the entire country, and it opened up the entire world.
Anybody could sign up from anywhere?
Anyone. And so we got
Dubai,
orders from
Japan. Could sign up?
We got orders from Canada.
Oh, God.
So we fulfilled them. We fulfilled them. So,
yeah, you figure it out, right? Don't say no.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. We said, how can we fulfill these orders in Canada? And so we did it.
That's a great story.
So then it helped us really understand that, I said, who left? It was funny because afterwards I said, who left the zones open? Right. And nobody wanted to take
we would admit it,
because everyone had access to it. There was no sign in or user sign up,
You couldn't
or
tell.
user sign in for that. So we couldn't tell. Then I said, who left it open? And so finally was like, I left it open. And I was like, great freaking job, man. I was like, that was the best thing that you could have ever done.
Yeah, let's
because
just light
now
the world on
we
fire.
we just delivered in Canada and we took some orders for Japan. So good for you.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I was on a video podcast yesterday. We were talking about leadership and resiliency and all the kind of things that people have been through. You basically did something in 3 months. It probably would have taken you 3 or 4 years because what would
absolutely.
Yeah, so you would have
yeah,
launched in all these cities.
And that's the thing is like that's
we
the
got to
thing
make
about
it.
entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Yeah. You just somebody asked me what was the most difficult decision. I said there are always difficult decisions. You got to do those sort of things, and it was a lot of it was accidental. By all means, some of it was done, on purpose, but for the most part, it just happens.
There's a lot to do with your personality, with the way you think, with the experience that you've had, where you don't take no for an answer, and you're like, listen, we're not going to shrivel up and go underneath the couch now that there's coronavirus. I mean, there's people that did that, unfortunately, but there's people, a few people that I know, and they're on my hand, not like filling up a room, that really pivoted during this thing and said, listen, I got 40 people that I do not want to put out of work. I can get other people to work. We can help people because they're all stuck in their homes. And you saw an opportunity, and it probably won't be the last one. And it might not be the last company, because that's just kind of like in your fiber of the kind of person that you are. And I don't know if that's exactly it. But I interview a lot of people. So
yeah, I was on Instagram one time and during the pandemic, and I saw that people were celebrating their birthdays by themselves, and they had a cake. And I'm like, why don't we have cakes on Gesture?
Yeah.
So I get my product team, and I'm like, get freaking cakes on here.
Yeah.
Get a birthday package, and birthday packages have been one of our most successful and most highest grossing items.
So
in terms
high margin item.
It's high margins. And it's been amazing.
What's the cost of a cake? The labor and the $2 worth of materials that go into the cake.
Exactly. So the cake, flowers, and champagne that you can send somebody this like instant birthday package. It gets delivered, and they're kind of like, "This is amazing." So
and they're all stuck in their homes, and they're looking to feel good.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Especially this winter, we feel like it's going to be just as lucrative as well. So it's going to be really cool.
Yeah. The ironic thing is now you've kind of positioned yourself where if there's a resurgence of this thing, it's just going to make you more money and grow your company more because people could be stuck inside again, and your parents are home and they're depressed because they're in their 70s and they're stuck home. You're like, well, we're going to send them shit,
That's exactly right. I send my mom flowers often, and one of the things that I was going to mention, and I forgot, I know we're coming to an end here, is that the biggest difference between Gesture and, anything else that's out there, because, I mean, you can go to 1-800-Flowers, you can go to, all these different companies that are out there.
We know that.
Of course, the biggest thing that we have decided to do is not focus on the sender as much as many other companies have, but we have decided to focus on what the recipient the experience of the recipient. And that's really, that's our sort of differentiating factor. Our recipients,
that's where all the PR comes from, right? That's where all,
it's that, but it's the experience of what somebody, it's personalization, it's using technology, but it's also just the outcome of what that, my mom will send me a picture of herself and flowers, and it's like, that's what this is about. The sender is one thing. Great. It's easy. It takes 3 minutes literally to send something on Gesture, 3 minutes versus 43 minutes on another app or another website. But, the recipient, I mean, that sort of experience is priceless. And that's what's amazing about it. So really cool stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you went back in January of 2019, you didn't know this was coming with the change in the world.
No, absolutely not.
Sometimes things just right place, the right time, and they blow up.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Just craziness. But I'm definitely going to download the app. We'll put some links in the show notes so people can, get on the platform. And I look forward to, watching your growth. And I don't know, you'll be ringing the bell at the stock market if we ever can go back there again someday.
Hey, that's one of my goals. I often go down to Wall Street, usually about once a quarter. I'll stand across the street, and I will visualize myself up there on the platform. And it's one of my goals, actually. So, yeah,
that is
glad
awesome.
you said it.
Well, Ben, I appreciate you coming on, telling your whole story. And, we'll do maybe in the future, we'll do some follow-ups and updates as the company grows and, people watch it in the news. I'm I'm honored to have been part of the journey to be
Hey,
able to tell
thanks
your
for having
story.
me. It was actually really fun. It made my day. It shifted my entire day talking about this sort of stuff. It's amazing.
Good.
So
I
thanks,
appreciate
Mitch.
it. Thanks, Ben.